In this video, I want to discuss some of the structures seen on the lung model. Remind ourselves we have already seen these blood vessels in the past. This model is good at depicting these from time to time. We will discuss the pulmonary arteries and veins as they do come into the lung. We do this respiratory lab. And we want to note one major thing. This model is rotated around. This is the right, this is the left. We want to note that the right lung has more lobes and is slightly larger in size in conjunction to our left lung, and this is because of the position of the heart. So the heart taking up predominantly the left side, you will note that the lung shape, lung size is determined by the heart. On each lung, on the right lung, we have multiple lobes in which you can note the boundaries and fissures for those lungs, for the lungs lobes. We have our superior lobe, our middle lobe, and our inferior lobe. Inferior lobe, if I tilt it slightly so you can see it just a little bit better, inferior lobe here. So on that model, you can see this completely distinctively determined by that model. Each fissure for these are determined by their shape. Our oblique fissure, our horizontal fissure of these models in order to depict and differentiate each lobe. And as we go through, note that on our left lung, the only fissure you will find here is an oblique fissure for the two lobes of the left lung, a superior lobe and an inferior lobe on that lung. On the left lung, we have one more structure we want to discuss. Is on the outside is this notch that is formed because of the position of the apex of the heart is this cardiac notch in the left lung. And as we continue to dissect this lung back as if we were doing some dissection, we will find structures of the inner lung. Also, it will behoove us to remove the heart from this model to see the internal structures that we want to see coming into here where the lung attaches, where the pulmonary arteries and pulmonary veins are coming in. This model doing a rather interesting job depicting this, noting that our pulmonary arteries are in fact blue in color because they're carrying oxygen-poor blood. But as you can see on this model, if we get ourselves associated here, we can see the trachea coming down. We can see the secondary we can see our bronchi coming in, our bronchial tubes coming in, and where all the blood vessels come in, we find this location called the hillis of the lung, just like you had a hillis of the lymph node, just like you had the hillis of the spleen, where all the structures are coming in and inserting to is referred to as the hillis. You can see the primary bronchi coming right in and directly attaching to the hillis, and besides the pulmonary veins in blue and the pulmonary arteries in red. You will note these structures coming into the lung as they come in, as they go in anastomose and branch out into the lung surface to collect through the alveoli in the lung itself. And this model will generally depict that fairly well, noting the trachea and these structures, the hillis of the lung. And as we look inside, again, you can note our primary, middle, and inferior lobes. Our superior, middle, and inferior lobe, our superior and inferior lobe dictated here on this side of the lung. And I want to discuss one other lung model as I put this one back. One thing we want to note on this model in particularly is the presence of the diaphragm here, which is incredibly important in respiration. And note that the curvature to the inferior aspect of the lung is determined by the shape of the diaphragm. So the lung's shape is determined by the heart and by the diaphragm, and receives most of its shape, position, and number of lobes from these structures. So as we continue to look at one other model, the model of the lung that comes from your torso models, we set ourselves here with the lungs. Zoom in on these models. We find ourselves here with the right and left lung. Note the differences in the sizes here becomes pretty evident. Cardiac notch, superior, middle, and inferior lobe. Oblique fissure, horizontal fissure, oblique fissure on left, superior, inferior lobe. You can see diaphragm here. When we come inside, you will not be able to see the Hillis, but you can see the bronchial tubes and the pulmonary arteries and veins as they come into the inner surface of the lung. So these models do a decent job at depicting, especially the external lung, and becomes very useful in discussing these in our anatomy labs. And this concludes my podcast discussing the lung. These should be all the structures of the lung you are responsible for, and I will do a separate looking at the trachea and bronchial tubes, more in depth, as they can be seen on other models, but it is nice to discuss these structures as they are associated with these models as well. So we have more models to see, more things that we can study. And this concludes my podcast on the lungs.